Hi, everyone. Name's Gordon Thornton. I work in the store support team in Vancouver. And here we're going to talk about this new API. Currently it's in closed beta, but should be in open beta before the end of this year. What we're going to do is I'm just going to give you a brief high level of what this API does and how it enables you to monetize on your content. And then my colleague Kevin's going to go into more detailed instructions on how to use this API within your application. So what is IAP? This is an API that allows consumers to effectively, well, allows you as developers and publishers to sell items and content within an application. If it was a Netflix app, you want to sell movies within the Netflix app. This API will allow you to do that. So the user will have their app, they'll press a movie they want to buy, they'll get a little overlay where they have to put in their password and then complete the purchase. So it's all done within the app. There's no need to remove them from your experience in order for them to complete the purchase. It's also really good in that it allows you to potentially lower the barrier to entry for your content. So you can now release all your content for free and then put hooks inside to monetize. Whereas before, you might have to put a price point before the user can download the app, which could be a barrier and obstacle, thereby maybe help you or allow you to miss out on potential users and people to download it. So Nokia has one of the world's largest billing operators footprints in the mobile industry, and this API effectively utilizes that billing relationship we have with all the operators. So it allows you to monetize your content on a global level. So here's just a high-level point of view from the ecosystem. As a publisher or developer, this allows you to, once again, release all your apps for free, all your content for free. Potentially have the app released, 10% of the app is free, and then if the user wanted to access the other features or other content within your application, you can then present them these in-app purchase overlays. It also allows you to maybe splice up your content further. So where you might have to sell the app at a price point of, say, €4, if you use this in-app purchase API, you could potentially split up your app into quarters and sell each one for 99 cents. So once again, it also makes it a lot easier for the users to access your content because they're consuming it at lower price points. Over a period of time, you will still get the amount of money you're looking for. From a consumer standpoint, once again, it's good for them in that now they have access to free content. They get to experience your app first, see if they like it. If they do, you then present them with these purchase points to enable further functionalities and enhancements. It's also good in that it's branded. It will have the Nokia store logo on there, so it builds trust in the user. It's the same overlay, branded overlay, no matter what application they're using. It's the same password. They just need to put their store password in there and then confirm the purchase. From an operator standpoint, it's more data being used. So they're obviously making a little bit more money on the data transactions of delivering this content to the devices. They're also making their money on the billing operator. So the Nokia gives the 60-40 split for operator billing, and each purchase, if going through the operator, will enable the operators to get some additional revenue as well. So I'm just going to go over briefly what kind of things we can support and what we don't support in the in-app purchase. So things like consumable items, we will support. These are items that the user, once purchases, have a one-time use. So if you're developing, say, a car racing game, you might want to release the game for free. Have a really cool-looking OpenGL racing game where open world, they get to drive anywhere they want, but the car requires fuel. And then they will, maybe in the game, drive into a gas station and pay 99 cents to fuel up their car. At which point, once they've done that, it consumes that fuel, it's done. Once their car runs out of fuel again, they're going to have to pay another 99 cents. So that's an example of what a consumable item is. The API also supports unlocking items, so permanent items. You could, say, in the racing game, perhaps release it for free. Your game doesn't need fuel. Cars can drive anywhere. But you have 50 cars available. Maybe you only enable one car for free, 99 cents to purchase another car, and the user can buy all other 49 cars if they want. So these, once they purchase that car, it's a permanent item. It's always assigned to their Restore account, no matter which device or where they move to. They've always got that item unlocked for your product. The last type we support is similar to consumables. It's called rental. This isn't too much different from consumables other than there's less restrictions on what measurement you might have. So we do support consumables that has a specific set of criteria on what a consumable item is, like a time-based subscription or a one-time use type of gas. The rental type allows you to get more in depth and determine what your measurement type you want to apply to this consumable item is. So it's very same as the other one, just allows you a little bit more freedom. Items that we do not support is selling physical goods. So we will not allow applications to get released in the store that are trying to sell potentially maybe concert tickets or some Pizza Hut application or something to that effect. We're not going to let you try and sell the user physical goods within this application. It must be digital content that can be consumed right there within the application. We do not support or allow reoccurring subscriptions. So you can support subscriptions, just when the subscription finishes, you must present the user an overlay if they want to continue using the application. You cannot just automatically rebuild them every periodic time. And lastly, the other items we do not support is selling applications within your applications. You can only sell items that are there to enhance or are features within your application. You cannot sell a completely separate set of applications within your app. So that is a good high level of what the in-app purchase API is all about. You can go to this website right now. It is open. Anyone can go there. And I highly recommend doing that if this is of something to interest you. And it will outline exactly what are the details, how to go ahead and use it, and how to plan. And yeah. So now I'm going to pass it over to Kevin, who's going to talk into more detail about how to actually implement this API and what are some of the things you need to be aware of.
Thanks, Gord. So my name is Kevin Chen, and I am a manager of the technical support team for the Nokia store. And I'm going to cover in more detail the in-app purchase API and steps that you need to take to implement this API into your application. So I'm going to start off with a high-level overview. This is the interaction flow between you as a developer, the intake system, and the store. So briefly, you create the content item. You also create the in-app purchase metadata within Nokia Publish. Then Nokia Publish will generate an ID that you will need to reference when you're making calls to the API. And then once the ID goes live in the Nokia Publish and the store, you can develop, test, and then when you're happy, you can submit your content item to QA. So in more detail, we'll start off with creating the content item metadata. So when the solution will go live, you will see the actual checkbox to enable in-app purchase. So once you select that, you will see a new tab. And then within this tab, you will define the display name, the long, short descriptions, and also the price point. So if you, as Gord mentioned, there's many options that you can have here, but for each in-app purchase item you have in your application, you need to create metadata for it. So once you've defined all the metadata, then you click on Create. And so what Create will do is it will generate an in-app ID right here. This is otherwise known as the product ID within the in-app purchase API. And you will use this ID whenever you're initiating a product purchase request. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So we need an in-app ID for all kinds of engines. We need a unique ID for the Turbo++ engine, and we need
Yeah, so sorry, the question is giving the example of a car racing game and turbo engine. So you will need an in-app ID for each content you're going to sell within your application. So let's say you have a game, it has 5 levels. Each level needs to have an ID associated with it. So once you click on the Submit button here, the metadata that you've just defined will go into the moderation team. They will review the metadata to make sure that you haven't included any offensive words or anything like that. So the turnaround time for that will be roughly 24 hours or so. It'll be a lot less in most cases, but it depends on whether what time of day you've submitted, for instance. So it will go through a round of moderation, and then once it passes, once it passes, the ID will be live in the system, which means that you can now start developing. A couple of things that I want to mention here. You need to include 2 files within your Qt application. The first file being the IAP variant ID file, and mostly this file is used by us when you submit your content in for processing. So it contains a variant ID, and it's more applicable for DRM protected content. And mostly it's used behind the scenes, so it's not something that you really need to think about too much, other than the fact that you need to include this file in your packaging. The second file is testmode.txt. So this enables you to test your application without having to actually pay for the purchases. So there are 2 types or 2 modes, I should say. The first mode being the simulation mode, which does not connect to any server, and it allows you to test the OK and the fail use cases. The second mode being test server mode, which actually connects you to an external server. However, it's not the live production environment, so it's going to take you to a separate billing server. And there you can test purchase, you can test restoration, and also the fail use cases. So this file will be taken out of your application before it gets deployed to the store. The next thing to consider is use of Nokia signing. And the reason is because when your application is submitted to the Nokia publish system, we will take your sys file, we will unpackage it, then we will encrypt the DRM resources, package it again, and then sign it. So if you happen to sign your app yourself, we can't do anything to the sys file without changing the signatures in the hash codes. The second thing is that if you are using encrypted resources, so Gord mentioned there are 3 types of in-app purchases. There's consumable, rental. So in the permanent use case, this is associated with DRM. So you need to specify files for encryption. And in order to do that, you need to specify this particular folder structure. So we have, I'll start with this first. So we talked about the 6-digit in-app ID. So you need to specify within your private folder, DRM, data, resource ID, and then your in-app ID. So you place any resource files that you would like encrypted into this subfolder. You can also encrypt resources that are outside of your in-app purchase content. So you place them within the DRM data subfolder. Okay, so now we're ready to modify our project profile within Qt Creator to define what the libraries are, what capabilities we're using. So at the top here, we defined LIAP client API with the fact that we're using Qt Mobility, in particular the service framework, the capabilities that in-app purchase library requires, network services, read device data, write device data. We also define the dependency to the Symbian 3 platform, so that it works on all Symbian 3 devices and later. We also define our dependency to this particular in-app purchase component. I mentioned about the two files, the in-app variant ID and also the test mode txt file. This is the syntax for you to include those files. And also, this is a syntax you would use to include files for encryption. This is the DRM data resource ID, and I've taken this from one of the samples. In this case, there are 3 resources that the developer wanted encrypted. So once you've done that, now you're ready to add or implement the source code to use the in-app purchase library. So this is a high-level overview of the actual the process. So the interaction between the application and the Nokia store. So we're starting off with, as the application, I have a list of the in-app IDs that I know that I'm offering to the user. So let's say, again, the game with the 5 different levels. So I retrieve from the Nokia store the metadata, which is what I defined earlier in Nokia Publish, the display name, the short, long description, the price points. And then I display this information to the user. So I have a menu. I have the 5 items that I'm selling. Probably not enough room to include every single detail, but you can just keep it simple. And then once the user selects a level to purchase, then it initiates, or the in-app purchase client library initiates the transaction, so the overlays that Gord was referring to earlier. And then the Nokia store, will handle the rest of the details. So this is the actual API. It's quite simple. The API is asynchronous, so I make a call, and a short time later, I get the corresponding signal. And also, we recommend that the calls be made in sequence, one after the other, and not concurrent, for the reason that it's probably easier to track your responses as they come. So we're going to go into more detail about each of the particular methods. So we'll start with get product data. And get product data, as I sort of demonstrated before, you specify as one of the parameters the in-app ID. So in the API documentation, in-app ID is the product ID. And you get back a hash table of the metadata. So when you parse it, you'll get the display name, short, long description, and the price points. So as an example to help you visualize, I've taken screenshots from an example written by our developer engagement team. It can be found from the site here, projectsdeveloper.nokia.com. And this example is called Project Barebones. It's a very simplistic example where there's 6 products for sale. 3 of them are encrypted with DRM, and 3 of them are not. So 3 of them are consumable, and 3 of them are permanent. And so what happens in this example, as soon as you start the application, it's just going to display the product IDs. And then a short time later, it's going to make a call to get product data, so it tries to fetch and display more information about the products for sale. The next sequence of methods is purchase product. So again, you specify the product ID. The second parameter that's listed is something that I'm going to talk or elaborate a bit more about restoration. So whether or not the transaction, if a restoration is eligible, then it's going to do a restore instead of a purchase. But I'll talk about that in the next slide. So with the purchase product call, you get 2 corresponding signals. First of which is purchase completed. And in the purchase completed, you will get a purchase ticket, which is just a string that's base64 encoded. And it's important that in the case of the consumable and rental, you should take note of that because this is sort of the receipt that you need to send to your own server so that if a user, let's say in the future, wants to restore your particular instance of the app, then they can do that from their own server. So I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. The second signal that is received is the purchase flow finished, which is just an indicator that the user has acknowledged by clicking on OK. And the focus is now back into your application. So here we go. As soon as the app calls purchase product, then it displays the prompt. So a note about this is that if a Nokia Store user has logged in within the last 15 minutes, then they are eligible for what's called silent restoration. So I'm going to talk about restoration in a sec. It's going to display the progress, followed by a confirmation of whether or not the user actually wants to go through with the purchase. And then right here, that's when they get the purchase completed callback. And then after they select OK, then it's purchase flow finished. So that's how it works. OK, so I mentioned very briefly about restoration. So restoration is a use case in which if, let's say, a user decides to reset their device, they can recover from the factory reset using the restoration API. So get restorable products, it's similar to get product data, but it indicates you make a call to the OV store, it will tell you which products are eligible for restoration. So in other words, which products are encrypted with DRM that are permanent and not consumable, not rental. Restoration isn't, the system will handle restoration for apps that employ the permanent method of IAP, but not for rental or consumable. That should be handled by the developer. So in get restoration products, one of the parameters is the actual authentication mode. So silent mode, meaning that if the user has logged in within the last 15 minutes, then the store client will retain the password information so that it will not prompt the user to log back in again. So this could be handy in a way that you can make your application a bit more flexible. So if the application itself knows that I don't need to prompt the user, maybe the application can then automatically restore the content items on behalf without having to prompt the user whether he wants to restore. So the flags here indicate whether or not you want to proceed with silent mode. The corresponding callback to this is to get restorable products as product data received. And so similar to the product purchase, there's the RestoreProduct method, and also using as a parameter the product ID and whether or not you want to proceed in silent mode. Once the restoration is done, then the restoration completed signal is generated. The get user and device ID and the corresponding user and device data received callbacks, this pertains more for applications that support the consumable and the rental in-app purchase type. So as I mentioned before, if you employ this type of in-app purchase, then you are responsible for the restoration. And to determine whether or not a user has purchased your content item, you can use this particular method in conjunction with something I'll talk about next to determine that. So the The API that can be used is called the Purchase Ticket Verification API. So it's a web-based API where you make HTTP requests, and it allows you to determine whether or not the user has purchased it. So based on the get user and device ID hash, as well as the base64 encoded string from the purchase completed callback. So with these two pieces of information, then you can make a request. And I'll show you the syntax. So I won't go too deep into this just because it's a lot of information, but I think the key point here is that there is such an API that exists. So if you happen to use this type of in-app purchase, then you have this API that you can use to help you confirm whether or not a user has made the purchase. And this is the response that you get back. So it indicates whether the response is OK in the body here. OK, so I have a couple of applications that are live in the store. So as Gord mentioned, we still are in a closed beta program, and we're sort of analyzing the results from a few apps that are currently live in the store, and just if there's any things that we can refine or improve upon. And I'm just going to bring up my screen here on my device. The first is an application by Idea and DesignWorks. It's called the Doctor Who Provocateur, the first edition. And it's a series of comic book apps that they've provided. So they employ the permanent type of in-app purchase, where after about 15 or so pages of the comic book, they will prompt the user to purchase the rest of it. So I'm just going to flow through this quickly. And then voila. So they asked me to purchase the comic book from the store. This is a live demo, so anything can happen. OK. They're going to prompt me for my password, and I'm going to enter that. But I'm going to mask it. There we go. It's connecting to the store. OK, so now it prompts me with whether I want to confirm the payment. It's $1.99 Canadian, which I think is a good deal. So it now directs me to the progress prompt. And right now it's connecting through a couple of different servers, but eventually when it gets the purchase completed acknowledgement, the license key manager will send the licenses to the device as the application is encrypting, and it's encrypting resource files, so it's applied DRM. And finally, once I press OK, then I get the purchase flow finished, callback, and so I can proceed with the rest of the application. I'm not sure how many pages in total there are in this comic. OK, so that's one example. The next example I want to show you is another game called Antarctica. And it's...
One question about the content. So the content is then encrypted with DRM.
the question, okay. I'm going to repeat your question. So your question is whether the content is encrypted with DRM. So the answer is yes. The content is, the first 15 pages or so were not encrypted, but the rest of the content is encrypted. Oops, I think I've relaunched Doctor Who. Let me go back. Okay. So Antarctica is a game that's been developed by Columbus Games. Sure. Or Columbia Games, I'm sorry. In this game, they employ the consumable method of in-app purchase, where they sell animals. There are 4 animals for me to choose from, hence there are 4 product IDs in this case. I've already purchased a whale and a red dragon and a blue dragon, so I think this time I'm going to purchase a Yeti. So I've selected a Yeti. It's making a call to the purchase product, and then I need to re-enter my credentials. Give me 1 second. There we go. The purchase flow would be similar as to what it was before. Nothing really different. So these are the 2 examples. If you go to the projects.nokia.com site, you will see, I think there are about 3 more examples that employ different modes of DRM. So a good idea to take a look at that, look through the code. Just want to confirm the payment. Okay, so looks like, and then if you see the indicator on the far right, looks like I've added 25 points. Sorry, I'm not too familiar with the game. That's all I wanted to demonstrate for this session. I'm going to open the floor up for some questions and answers, but if you do have a question, if you can wait for the microphone to arrive to you.
So all this is about content that is provided along with the app.
Yes.
And is just unlocked. So if I want to make, say, a game that comes with 4 levels, and then I wanted to continue to produce levels that are downloadable and installable, so people would have to purchase another level pack, and when they have all of them, they'll eagerly wait for me to announce the next one, and they'll buy it and download it. How would that work in that context?
So that is possible within this API. For the purposes of this presentation, I wanted to keep things as simple as possible, but yes, you will be able to host within your own server additional levels. So that changes the flow in some ways. But what you need to do is you need to create the product IDs within Nokia Publish. The actual submission process will be a bit different, although it's covered within the documentation, so I would suggest just to follow that. If you do have a question, then feel free to contact us, developer.support@nokia.com, and be able to help answer your question.
Hi.
Hi.
Are we able to sell desktop applications in Nokia Store?
To my knowledge, I don't know if there's any plans of selling desktop applications to the Nokia Store. Okay. Do you have any other questions with that? No? Okay.
And more to come. So people buy my levels, and we're all happy, and they pay €1 for a level a pack.
Yeah.
How much money are eaten by operators and Nokia, and how do I get the remaining money?
So it follows the same operator revenue share that currently exists in place. I believe it's 70-30.
70-30 for credit card, 60-40 for operator.
Okay, so 70-30 for credit card billing and 60-40 for operator billing. So that would be the revenue split.
So on operator billing, the operator takes 40%, so there's €60 left for Nokia Store and me.
It's so our cut comes from the operator billing portion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So €60 goes into my account, and how do they go into my pocket? I mean, how do I get the money? Are they transferred every once a month when I reach a certain amount, when I request it, when I drop by with a wallet?
Yes, yes. Gord, do you have those details?
Yeah, as Kevin mentioned, the billing is very much the same as what is currently in place for non-in-app purchase applications. So when you're just selling your application for €1 as a price point, the exact same billing rules and regulations apply. So I believe you get payments every 30 to 45 days, depending on the whole payment process is very complicated. Credit card payments will tend to maybe get processed faster than operator payments. So it's not exactly a clear-cut answer, but there is a lot of support and items in the store that can help you track your payments. There's features in the store that will give you estimated revenue, how much you can expect in the next 45 periods, and you can also track and follow your payments there.
But at more or less regular intervals, money are transferred to... I never sold an app, so this is totally new to me, so forgive my ignorance.
Yeah,
but,
no
but at more or less regular intervals, my revenue is transferred to an account that I've provided.
Yeah. So when you in order to do this, you have to be a registered publisher, and during the registration process, you will have to provide your banking details. So it will the money will go into that account that you've set up. Okay. Any other questions? If not, we're here, so you guys can feel free to come up and take a look at some of this stuff as well.
Yeah, that concludes our presentation, and thank you for coming out. Feel free to come up and talk to us. We were happy to take feedback from any current existing developers.
Kev, is there still an idea of when the closed beta will open up?
So Gord asked a question about the availability, when we can expect the closed beta to be public beta. Currently, we are sort of in the final stages, just making sure that everything works in all countries and the experience is best for the end user and for developers as well. So we don't actually have an exact date, but we do know that it would be sooner rather than later. Okay, thank you all.